are back for another Talk About It Tuesday. And of course, we have another great question. Let me get right to it. At what age should you give a child control of their own money? Now, let me just give that some context because the person who asked me was referring to a teenager who received an inheritance from a relative. And I guess it goes to any type of source of income, big chunk of change that a child, whether a young child or a teenager, could get. At what age do you give them control over that, or do you control it yourself? And the simple answer is when you believe they can handle it. So that really leads us to a different question. At what age should you start teaching them the fundamentals of money? And again, that's going to vary. But I think one thing that parents do, and I think they should expand their horizons. They focus on literacy, right? They want their child to be able to read very early. I want my child to be able to read when they're 4 or they're 5 or whatever the case is. They focus on literacy, but they neglect numeracy. And most adults neglect numeracy, right? You need to be able to count. You need to be able to add, subtract, multiply, divide. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur or an investor, those and understand probability. So if you understand those 5 types of math, if you teach those 5 types of math to your child, they will fare better later on in life when it comes to investing, entrepreneurship, or just handling their money in general. So at what age do you start them? I will tell you, my children started very, very young. I can remember when my oldest was 6 and my youngest was 3. We would sit around and play Cash Flow for Kids, which is a great game, by the way, for teaching the fundamentals of investing in entrepreneurship to young children. I can remember coming home and giving them big stacks of cash to count so that they understood the difference between one denomination and another, and that they could, count accurately. And we would even play a game. I would show them a stack and try to guess, right? So that's to understand the probability also. Guess how much is in this stack. And then they got used to seeing various sizes and amounts of money and looking at different denominations and being able to estimate how much money it was. And then we would, have fun counting it out and doing things like that. One thing that's important too, was another thing that I did, was involve them in the bill paying process. It's funny because we usually exclude children from that because we don't want to, involve them for some reason. But they need to understand what things cost. They need to understand that there's a cost to put on a light, that there's a cost to run water, that there's a cost to cooking, that there's a cost to everything. They need to understand the costs that are associated with everything. And they need to understand that a certain amount of income has to come in, but that income doesn't stay in, that there's a certain amount that goes out all the time. Because if they don't understand those fundamental things, it's a shock when it's time for them to leave. They have this unrealistic idea about what life costs. So it's important to teach them that young. It's important to include them in that young. And what else? Those things were important. Understanding the difference between price and value. That's a major lesson. So, of course, my kids, like any other kids, would always ask when we went to a store or when they saw something they wanted, Daddy, can I have that? Can I get that? And 2 things important. One, you had to earn certain things, right? You had to, there was criteria, you had to earn it. But I would always let them understand the difference between price and value, right? So I would never say, no, we can't afford it. I'm so lucky to have been able to do that. But sometimes I would say no because it's not worth that, right? You have to understand that the value of that is not worth the price that they're asking. So no. And they learn that the difference between price and value, and that's super important. So as they got older, you start to see personality differences, right? And so I understand the difference in the personality types. I have 3 kids and they all have different personalities. So my oldest son is not into entrepreneurship, and he learned that kind of the hard way. He would tag along with me all the time. He interned with me in the summer times. He took classes with me. He majored in business in undergrad when he got to college. And he realized he does not like entrepreneurship at all, doesn't suit him, doesn't like it, but he doesn't mind investing. And so I had to steer him towards where he has an affinity, right? So he enjoys, he has a good feel for investing. So I had to steer him that way. My daughter started doing entrepreneurial things early, probably maybe around 10, 11 to 10. She started doing little small things, and I could see that she had a feel for that. She enjoyed entrepreneurship, but she also enjoys investing. So when she was 10, she set up her first little shop and was selling things that she didn't want anymore. And she had done things like that through her development. By the time she was 18, I taught her how to invest, and she did her first investments when she was 18 and made a ton of money doing that. So she's 22, 23 now. Wow, 23. And she has a good, solid foundation in entrepreneurship and investing, and she's able to do that on her own. My youngest son doesn't necessarily like the investing part, and we didn't focus a lot on that, but he has it for entrepreneurship. And even though he's away at school, he's still doing entrepreneurial ventures. This guy, from the young age, I don't know how he does it, but he understands. When I taught him value, he understands that so well that he finds things that his peers like, for instance, sneakers. One day I saw this boy wearing an $800 pair of sneakers. He said, "Don't worry, Dad. Of course, I didn't pay that much for them. I got a deal." He said, "And I'm going to sell them." I said, "What do you mean you're going to sell them? How are you going to sell something you're wearing?" He said, "Dad, you have no idea. These are rare. I'm going to wear them first, and I guarantee you I'll get more than $800 for them." And he was right. Like, he understands price and value, and he understands what the market wants. He understands what his peers wants, and he understands how to use technology to get the reach, right? And so, they have a good, solid foundation. Now, here's the thing. It doesn't matter what foundation you give them. They will go through a period of what I call earn and burn. And what does that mean? As soon as they earn that money, they're going to burn that money. Because conservation is not a human trait, not naturally. Conservation, delayed gratification is not a natural human trait. That has to be developed. That is a fairly modern thing. Because if we go back in our evolutionary development, you did something immediately and you immediately consumed, right? So if you gathered food, you consumed it. If you hunted food, you consumed it. There wasn't this, "Oh, I'm going to put money away and then 20 years down the road, I'm going to take advantage of the exponential growth through interest." That's all new. So it's not normal for us to behave that way. It's not normal for us to put it off and to be able to envision a future 20 years down the road, because that's what we want for our children, right? If you start saving now when you're 11, by the time you're my age, you'll be a multimillionaire. It's not going to happen. They have to go through it. We all went through it. It's a normal process of earn and burn, but you can't bail them out. And that's the secret. Do not bail the kid out. They earn and burn, and now they go without. And that's how they learn to stretch out a little further and a little further, the delayed gratification, until they start to understand, okay, let me put this away so I have like spending power down the road from work I just did today. So don't panic. Even if you feel they have the fundamentals and you give them access to the money, they're probably going to blow it because the young mind is not fully developed, right? We have poor judgment. The judgment portion of the brain doesn't even fully develop to 28. So unless you're going to wait until they're 29, they're probably going to do something stupid with the money, and they think it's a great idea, but you have to let them make mistakes too, because that's part of the growth process. So eventually it'll get back to the fundamentals, but start the fundamentals early, teach them the things that they need to know, and maybe you want to give them the money in pieces, and that way they don't blow the whole thing, and they definitely are going to blow the beginning. That's almost a guarantee. And then, they'll do a little better with the next set and the next set, but that's just part of life. So hopefully that answered the question. Start them early, give it to them, let them do what they're going to do. Support them, but don't bail them out. And, that's just a part of the growth process. So keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next Tuesday.